Ladies and gentlemen, Phantom Blade Zero is a Souls-like hack-and-slash RPG many people are saying is either going to be the next competitor for Game of the Year, while others are saying it's just too good to be true. So let's take a deep dive into this game and see what other people that actually got to play the game had to say. This way, we can figure out what side of the fence you're on. And remember to hit that like button and subscribe to keep up to date on all the games you're not going to want to miss. So this game has a lot of controversy surrounding it because of how absolutely stunning it looks. And we've seen a very similar story with Black Myth Wukong. And once that game finally came out, everybody realized that all the gameplay footage and all the trailers that actually looked too good to be true actually was true. So this is why there's so much push and pull going on about this game. But let's dive in. Phantom Blade Zero is being created by the studio S-Game, and this is their latest entry into a series of other already existing Phantom Blade games. However, this is the first of its kind when it comes to this specific genre and magnitude. This is because all the prior Phantom Blade games have been side-scrolling hack-and-slash games, so Phantom Blade Zero is quite the change from what the studio has put out in the past. But it looks like they're really knocking it out of the park so far. The story behind this game also has a nice, unique flavor to it. Phantom Blade Zero takes place in a phantom world, a place where many powers converge as you play as the character Soul. We're an assassin that works for an enigmatic group known as the Order. Soul has been framed for the murder of the Order's patriarch and is now the target of a manhunt and was gravely injured in battle. However, he was found by a mystical healer and was given a cure for his infections, but that cure will only last for 66 days. And during that time, we have to figure out why we were framed. So a very interesting, non-cookie cutter story that we got here so far. The combat of the game is very interesting, and they're going all out with this as it's based off of Chinese martial arts. And they actually used real kung fu masters in Hong Kong, motion captured them, and used that for this game, which I'm a freaking huge fan of. Now, this is clearly a third-person ARPG, primarily a hack and slash, with the focus on very long combos, and yes, this game appears to be Souls-inspired, much in a way as Black Myth Wukong was. It's not going to be a true-to-form Souls-like though, but a lot of the core principles that are present in Souls-like fashion are certainly apparent here. We're going to have the big epic boss fight battles. We have our single target lock-on system. My favorite, we have that pinpoint timing parry system being the primary way to negate all damage, while still having to learn attack patterns for these bosses and different enemy types as you move throughout the game. But what I really think sets this game apart and makes it so flashy and satisfying is that many of your actions in combat will trigger these long, drawn-out animation sequences, unleashing devastating combos from the player. Soul is equipped with two weapons, one primary and one offhand, which is called a Sashi weapon. And there's going to be a bunch of different variety here, from daggers to katanas, axes, even great hammers and cannons, that when combining these different weapons, they're all going to change how your playstyle actually plays out. And this leaves us as the player with a lot of creative options to work with, like how we plan or approach our combat. The combat kind of reminds me of Sekiro, but like not as methodical, and it brings way more flashiness to its overall look and feel. You definitely will have an offensive and defensive side of combat where you're not always going to be able to just spam your attacks, but we'll have more of this push and pull between being aggressive and preparing yourself to be more on the defensive. We clearly see a posture bar or a stance bar that can be broken, so you will have to deflect and counter these attacks as you try to maintain consistent pressure on the enemy. And we also have this large blue flashing attack that you'll have to perfect parry at the correct time. This is going to slow down time and give you this really wild animation. So there's a lot of different combat mechanics going on to make this a fluid gameplay experience. The HUD is very clean cut. With how our enemy moves, it makes sense that we don't really see a stamina bar here. We see at the bottom left the health bar and healing items, and on the right we see what's potentially our special weapon abilities. Now, with all this flashy combat, people are thinking that this is going to be like overwhelmingly difficult or almost too complex to even be played on a controller. But because of the HUD, we could see that the systems going on here aren't anything that we haven't seen before in ARPGs. It's just that Phantom Blade Zero seems to be specializing in these flashy cinematic gameplay sequences from your standard combat moves. They explain it as their own special combat design, still only relying on two buttons, which on controller will be box and triangle, and the different orders that you press these buttons will create different combos. That, plus the introduction of flowing into the perfect dodges and parries, and whatever else this game plans on throwing at us, will make for quite the beautiful action scene. So not super complicated, but very captivating. stating. Now for level design, as of now, we mainly only see boss fights, so information on how the game is laid out is still very scarce. However, we still do have some nuggets of information to go off of. According to the wiki for this game, its world is described as a semi-open world, with a quote from the game director stating, "It's just like the old Souls-like games. You move around and explore in a seamless map. It's just not a huge open world map, but every region is connected together seamlessly." And this sounds on point for me personally. The director goes on to say, quote, "There are certain gates that require keys, and the keys are obtained from submissions. There's still some process you go through, but it's non-linear. There are always multiple paths you can go through. It's just like the Souls games before Elden Ring." So I can imagine that there's going to be these bonfire style type of checkpoint systems, but that's not confirmed as of yet. They also stated there won't be a lot of punishment when you die, and their focus is more of a positive feedback than negative when it comes to the gameplay. Now, something else that really piqued my interest is that Phantom Blade Zero will be about 30 to 40 hours long to get through, just thinking about the main story, but there will be a plethora of endgame content, which they described as multiplayer dungeons, boss rushes, and roguelike dungeon runs on top of that. So no confirmation on New Game Plus as of now, but at least we could say they're working on something to keep this game fresh for just that much longer in the endgame area of it. So let's take a peek at some of the feedback that was given from some of the people that already got their hands on the game. There's been several different demos held at many different game shows, including Gamescom, and they got to fight a lot of bosses that you've been seeing gameplay of throughout this video. PC Game stated that Phantom Blade Zero is the most fun I've ever had with a Souls-like. All the games I played at Summer Games Fest this year, S-Game Phantom Blade Zero was my favorite, and I don't often enjoy Souls-likes. And just to touch on this a bit, Phantom Blade Zero is not an official Souls-like. It just has parts that would be present in a Souls-like. This game seems more like it's going to be for the people who don't like that brutal difficulty of a Souls-like, yet will get to take part in an easier experience for the broader audience to enjoy, while still having those banger boss fights and fun cinematic combat and parry-like gameplay. The gamer states, 10 minutes with Phantom Blade Zero was enough to know it'll be an absolute banger. Game Rant stated, it's rare that a game gets a hands-on demo for media when it's still so far out, but Phantom Blade Zero sure made an impression with its initial PS5 trailer reveal, subsequent gameplay trailers, and now this hands-on opportunity. It may not be a Souls-like, but if the full game matches the quality of this small sample, Phantom Blade Zero is sure going to be a massive hit like one. We're going to be getting a release date sometime this year for PS5 and PC, so subscribe to be notified for that, and sound your thoughts off in the comments below. Also, if you're looking for something else to do, check out some of these playlists coming up on your screen next. Toodles!